Ambassador Clapp, we welcome you.
Thank you very much, Tricia. I don't know if I could say anything after all of that. It's made me much larger than life.
No, larger, yes, larger than your physical stature, but not your presence and character.
Thank you very much. Well, I have 15 minutes to discuss a very complicated topic. So I'm going to boil it down to basic facts. First of all, Burma is a country about the size of Texas that sits between Southeast Asia and South Asia. It's considered part of Southeast Asia, but it borders on Thailand, Laos, China, India, and Bangladesh. And it has about 60 million people. Most of those people, I'd say 70 to 80% of them live in extreme poverty by our standards. They eke out a life mostly off the land. 70% of the population is agrarian, farmers, but they don't farm in very good conditions. A lot of the rural population is currently moving into the cities because they're trying to find a way to live. The agricultural profession is not supporting them properly. The country had very oppressive military government for 50 years. It came out of 100 years of colonial existence under the British. In 1948, it had about, 14 years of experimental democracy. Didn't work. The military staged a coup, took over, and stayed in place for 50 years, and basically militarized the government, the economy, the whole country. And that's how the people descended into the poverty that they're in today. That's how the country remained so closed for 50 years that most people in the world don't know much about them. That was purposeful. They did not want the military governments did not want any foreign influence in the country. It was very difficult for foreign governments, foreign institutions, NGOs, and so forth to do any work there. In 2010, they decided in 1988 to make a transition back to some form of multi-party democracy. It took them 20 years to write a new constitution that built the military into this new multi-party democracy. They held elections in 2010 on the basis of this new constitution. They forced all of the generals to take off their uniforms, put on civilian clothes, and run for office. And of course, they won big time in the elections. So the majority in the parliament is a military group. Furthermore, they have 25% military, uniformed military in their parliament. The parliament elected a new president who is an ex-general. He used to be prime minister in the last military government. And he turned around in his inaugural address at the end of March in 2011 and announced that he was going to undertake a major economic and political reform program in the country. Nobody believed him. He made that announcement, he gave that speech 2 more times, and still people were very skeptical about it. So he started doing things. He started bringing in civilian advisors. He met with Aung San Suu Kyi, and they became colleagues and friends. He invited the NLD, her party, into the government and made it possible for them to run in some by-elections and win 46 seats. I guess no, actually it's 44 seats in the parliament. So they actually are the second largest party in the parliament after the government party. And he started listening to the people and saying, we want to make this government responsive to the people. The military has never done that before. There is now, this is 2013, 2.5 years later, there is a major transformation underway in that country, and people believe it now. He has freed up the press. They have a very lively press. It's the only country in the world where the printed press is expanding. Political debate in the country is now legal. It was not legal before. It's becoming very lively. Civil society is being allowed to organize. NGOs are organizing. The government is trying to transform itself. It's a very slow process. It still has a very, very heavy military overlay. There's no question about that. But it's the military themselves, who are now ex-military, that are leading this reformation process, and they are bringing the democratic organizations in the country along. The former opposition, the democracy opposition, is now joining with the government in this move to democratize the country. They have invited back the exiles from 1988. 1988, there was a big revolt in the country, and many people were forced to leave between 98 and 1993 or 4. Many people were jailed, and those who weren't jailed fled the country. They've lived here in the U.S., they've lived in Europe, they've lived in Thailand. They've become educated far beyond their colleagues back who were stuck back in Burma. The new government has invited them back to help with this transition. They're restoring their citizenship, they're restoring their position in the country. The president has just named one of them his senior economic advisor. They are embedded now in the policy process with the government, not in the government, but working in policy institutes outside, but working with the government to change policy, to put new policies in place. They're working in the peace process to try and make peace with the smaller ethnic groups that have been fighting against the government all these years. And there's real hope that something very significant is happening in this country, but it could easily go off track. In a country that has been ruled by military for so long, all you need is one serious conflagration, one serious outbreak in the country for the military to come back in and say, we need to bring this back under control. So everybody's keeping their fingers crossed that this transition can be institutionalized from the ground up so that they can actually have a stable, sustainable democracy in the country, that people want it very much. The population of this country actually has, I think, very high intellectual capacity. Unlike Cambodia, Laos, many of the other poor countries that we see around the world, Burma has very, very high intellectual capacity, as much as the people have been repressed for so many years. And when they're given a chance to learn new things, to move into new areas, they get it very quickly, particularly the younger generation. And I'm placing my hope in the younger generation because they have the most flexibility to move with these changes and to push them forward. The older generation tends to be wary of change. As much as they hated the old government, they're not comfortable with the changes that are coming, and they're very reluctant to move. But the younger generation is taking full advantage of the openings they have right now, and they're pushing hard. I also think that one of the very important things that's happening in the country is the organization at the grassroots level that's now being allowed to develop. The military government would never allow that because it would have been a threat to them. Now they see it as a bonus, and so they're encouraging foreign donors and so forth, organizations, to come in and help with organizing civil society, working at the grassroots level, bringing people up, teaching them the fundamentals of democracy, because they know that it's missing. And it's an enormous opportunity. I'd like to just say, in closing, a short word about Shanta, because Shanta is one of the most important, not one of the most important, that's the wrong word. I would say that it's one of the most effective small NGO organizations that I have seen working on the ground in this country. Many foreign NGOs go. And they will come in and say, well, we've got to bring a health program, or we've got to help with some health problems here or some hunger problems there, but they come and they go. Shanta goes in and lives in these villages and helps the villagers learn how to do this for themselves. Not many foreign organizations will actually go in and sit on the ground and live in the villages and help them do it, and that's the only way it's going to happen. Otherwise, it's here today, gone tomorrow. And I think that the programs that Shanta has started in this, it's a very small area of the country, and it's one of the minority ethnic groups of the country, and they're very backward. They're living basically at a feudal level of existence, which is not necessarily bad. They do survive, but it's a very hard life. And by going there and staying with these people, living in the village, Mike and Tricia and others who have gone with them from in this room have been able to see what the people need and what kinds of value added they can bring to their lives, and how they can gradually help them lift their living standards. And they're looking at, you know, health issues, women's issues, water, schooling, but particularly education. Give the kids education, get them up to the secondary level and the tertiary level. They'll come back and sustain this transition. When they get out of college, they will come back and work in their villages. And that will be the sustainable factor in the end. That's when you can begin to walk away. It's going to take, you know, sort of half a generation to do it, but they're dedicated to that, and that's what I think is important. So I think it's wonderful that you all come out tonight in support of Shanta, because it is a great organization, and a penny spent on Shanta is a penny well spent. Oh, okay. So
I'm going to give time for 1 or 2 questions for Priscilla.
I spoke so fast that I didn't fulfill my quota.
Well done.
Anybody got a question?
Do I see a hand? Okay, please yell for us, David, because we haven't got a...
You were talking about possible threats in which the military may come in and squelch what's happening. I'm curious if you could speak a little bit about what's been going on with the Buddhist violence against Islam.
That's exactly what I had in mind. But you know, when you remove this repressive layer from a society, all sorts of problems begin to appear that are just problems that are inherent in the society itself, that have been held down. The society has not been allowed to develop. It's not been allowed to begin to work out its problems because they haven't been able to interact with each other. One of the things that's coming out now, and this existed in the colonial years, it's nothing new, is a real schism in the society between Buddhists and Muslims. And there are some young Buddhist monks who've been trained in Sri Lanka, where there are it's a rather extreme nationalist form of Theravada Buddhism. And they have become very sort of Buddhist nationalists in Burma, anti-Muslim. And it's tended to stoke a kind of radicalism within the Muslim community there. And so these two radical communities within much larger non-radical communities are clashing and sparking communal violence in certain parts of the country. It's just moving around the country right now. And it's a very serious problem. It's something they need to deal with, the society needs to deal with it. And they are coming together. They have interfaith discussions going on now. The government has banned some of the more radical Buddhist movement. It's called the 969. And they're moving gradually against it. They have to be careful because it's very political. And people are worried that this communal violence may be the excuse the military needs to come back in. So it detracts from confidence in the transition itself, and the government understands this. So they're trying to handle it very carefully so that they don't make it a worse problem than it already is. Furthermore, they have to deal with a lot of criticism from the outside world. The external press is making a big issue of this and misrepresenting it in many ways, and making it worse and inflaming sensitivities in the Muslim world, so that it runs the risk of bringing jihadists into Burma to start conflagrations, attack Buddhist sites or something. It's very, very dangerous. And this is something that I know the US government and many others are quite concerned about and are working hard with the Burmese government. It's Myanmar. I say Burma because it's easier to say. It's not a political statement. At any rate, there's a lot of thought going into this, and they're listening and responding. And I think that if we are patient and just keep working with them on dialogue, it will help mediate the problem.
I'm really grateful that question came up because I get asked it a lot, and it's really wonderful to have an informative response instead of one I would make up. So, Priscilla, when we're in the villages, the elders in the village often honor us and say goodbye to us by presenting us with the white scarf. And this has probably happened to you before.
Well, yeah, the last one was an Elvis Presley impersonator. From the stage of the Kennedy Center in Washington. He came down off the stage and put it around.
Oh, no. Well,
but it wasn't such a beautiful scarf. You know what this is? This is a hand-woven silk scarf.
Yes.
Oh, my goodness. It's not Lotus, right?
No, it's not my
It's silk. Yeah,
next
it's
time. If I
hand-woven
know it was
silk
your
scarf.
birthday, it would have been Lotus.
No, that's beautiful.
Deep gratitude.
Thank you.